Hello everyone, welcome to my vlogging day. I would just want to say a big thank you so much for all of the warm congratulations and warm happy wishes in response to my pregnancy announcement video. It really means so much to me, and also I'm so happy to hear that it may have given some of you a little bit of hope if you are also struggling with infertility. And that really is my goal in talking about this, because it's just something that's not talked about enough. So I'm really happy to hear that that may have given somebody out there a little glimmer of hope for their rainbow baby. Today we are going to do a little Q&A. I asked you all in the comment section of my video and also in my Instagram to comment any questions that you had about IVF, infertility, pregnancy, this baby, etc. And you came back with so many great questions. I didn't even know where to start, but I thought, you know, it's probably best if I split this into two videos, because otherwise it's going to be excessively long and hard to keep track of. So today we're going to talk mainly about infertility and IVF and the questions that you had around that. And then in maybe a couple weeks, we'll have another video that comes out that's focusing more on pregnancy, this particular baby, and other kind of miscellaneous questions like that. Now, before we get started, of course, my general disclaimer that anything you're about to see or hear in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. And I am absolutely not prescribing anything for anybody, because everybody's case is different. I really just am trying to share my experience and what I've learned through my journey in infertility and trying to conceive. Now, on that note, let's get to our first question. Okay, so number one, what is your infertility diagnosis? So it's technically PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome, and I have an amazing video all about PCOS that I will leave a link to in the description below. But I don't really fit the traditional mold of a PCOS patient, in that I really only fit some of the criteria, mainly that I don't ovulate and I have slightly polycystic ovaries. And I'm talking like 1 or 2 or 3 points over the threshold of what is considered normal. So my main actual issue when it came to trying to conceive, at least via IVF, was that my uterine lining was not thickening, and that my baseline estrogen was very low, which was making it hard for my uterine lining to thicken. So your uterine lining, if you remember back in sex education class from grade 7, is what sheds when you have a period each month. And that's why I wasn't getting a period, and I wasn't ovulating. But that lining is really important for the embryo to kind of bury into and snuggle into, and that's what keeps it kind of in place for implantation and for a successful pregnancy. So that was not happening for me. And we didn't know why exactly, but I did transfer to another doctor for this last cycle, which was the cycle that eventually got me pregnant. And that was really amazing. And my doctor suggested very gently that, you know, we don't know why your uterine lining isn't thickening or why you're not responding to estrogen, but we also do see sometimes that some women do respond to prolonged use of the birth control pill. And I was on the pill for 13 years of my life, by, you know, seeing this kind of suppressed estrogen over even after you come off, and difficulty thickening the uterine lining. So maybe that's what's going on. So you may say that I had something closer to something like post-pill PCOS or post-pill amenorrhea, but we really don't have a whole lot of research on that. That's just something that, you know, I've read about. It's kind of like a subset of PCOS, which is a little bit more of an umbrella term, so to speak. But if you want to hear more about the research that we do have on the birth control pill and future fertility, I can do a whole other video on this. That was one of the questions that you guys had for me, is does the pill affect fertility? I want to know the truth. That was what somebody said. And that's going to require a whole investigative video on itself. So if you're interested in that, leave me a comment below and I can whip that up for you. I'll dive deep into the research. But like I said, it's controversial, and we don't have a whole lot of research on this post-pill amenorrhea or post-pill PCOS. Okay, next question. Did you know you were going to have trouble conceiving, and did you do anything else before moving on to IVF? Okay, so I mean, once upon a time when I was a teenager, I mean, weren't we all just like terrified of getting pregnant? And you thought that you only had to have sex once and automatically you were gonna get pregnant even if you were on the pill and using a condom, right? It's so much harder than that. Of course, it's easier when you're young, but still. I went off the pill when, this was several years ago, in like July, for example, when I got married. Then October came around, still didn't have a period. At that point, I spoke to my doctor and I was like, I would like to start to try to have a baby. Don't have a period yet from being on the pill for so long. What's going on? And she said, you know, some women, it can take several more months to get your period back. It could take 6 months or so, so just wait it out. But something in my gut was just telling me that something was wrong, that something was amiss. So I got a referral to a private fertility clinic in my city, Toronto. And that's where they did a workup and they diagnosed me with PCOS. So the first line of treatment was to put me on metformin, which is a traditional drug used for blood sugar management in people with type 2 diabetes. And so the unfortunate thing was, because my blood sugars, it was kind of a silly thing to put me on, and I knew that as a dietitian, but I did it anyway because that's what the doctor said. But in my mind, I'm thinking, my blood sugars are perfect. Like, they are not high. They do not need to be managed. So the metformin actually just made me have like a ton of blood sugar lows. In the night, I'd wake up sweating and like starving. It was like horrible. It was just a bad experience. And that went on for months of me being on this drug before it kind of like normalized. So tried that. Obviously that did not bring on a period or ovulation. Then they put me on a drug called letrozole. I did like 5 cycles of letrozole, of like just continually like increasing the doses and adding in other adjuncts to the mix in an effort to get me to ovulate. Never ovulated. So at that point, my doctor was like, you're not ovulating, so we really can't do IUI. You're not a good candidate for IUI. So we had to decide to either just like wait it out or go straight to IVF. And I didn't want to waste any time not knowing what was in store for me in my life. And unfortunately, the way this fertility stuff works is like every month matters, right? Like, we just get older as women and it gets more challenging. So I didn't want to waste any time, so we just jumped right into IVF, and we started that process in like April. So it went from like July, and then by April we were starting our drugs to prepare for our IVF egg retrieval. How old were you when you first tried to conceive your first child? Okay, so I was 28 when I got married and went off the pill. I was 29 when I got pregnant. So I started the IVF process, I guess, at 29, got pregnant shortly after. I was 30 when I had my first child. Now this round, I'm a little bit older, so I was almost 32. I was snuck in there at 31 when I got pregnant, when I got the early news. I think it was like right around my birthday. So I was like 31, 32, and I'll be 32 having this baby in August. So still relatively young. I mean, you're not considered higher risk until you're 35. And I don't want women out there to be freaking out because they're almost 35 or they're 35 or older. Like, there are lots of women having babies without trouble when they're 35. But we just know statistically, of course, that some of the risk factors do go up. So it's just something to think about. Okay, what is the worst part about IVF? So I feel like most people would think I'm going to say either like the needles or the money, neither of which are fun. Especially, I mean, none of it's fun. The drugs, the hormones, how you feel physically. But I would say for me, it was the anxiety and the feeling of like lack of control especially during a process where you seemingly are controlling for almost everything. It's not just like, you know, your normal natural cycle where you have sex and maybe you'll get pregnant that month and you're making love. Like, no, this is a science, folks. I'm taking drugs and injections at a very specific time of a very specific day for months. So yeah, like just imagine for a second having to spend 1 to 2 hours every morning, depending on how busy the clinic was that day, in the waiting room. Women, you know, everyone's got their eyes down. Nobody wants to make eye contact. Everyone feels ashamed or just like scared and nervous and anxious. And then only to go home and literally like wait by the phone, like twiddling your thumbs, like, please call me until like 3 p.m. that day for the nurse to call you and to tell you if things are looking good or if things are looking bad. So it was like really emotionally draining and exhausting. And yeah, like there's a reason I didn't sleep very much this past year. So yeah, for me, it was just the emotional toll that it took on my life. All right, next question. Are you going to do genetic testing? Yes, actually we did. We did a lot of genetic testing. So my husband and I, before we even started to try to have a baby, we both had our, I don't know, like our full genome tested. And then like kind of, they tested it against each other to see if we were at risk for having children with any kind of disabilities or disadvantages and things like that. That all came out perfectly fine, especially because my husband's Ashkenazi Jewish, which we know that there are some higher risk factors for Ashkenazi Jews, and I am Caucasian, I guess, British ancestry, and as the geneticist says, I kind of like wiped out a lot of the risk factors with being different races, basically. So yeah, that we did, that was fine. Then we also PGS tested our embryo, so it's called like pre-genetic screening. So they biopsy the embryo and then freeze it, and then they test that little piece of the embryo for certain higher risk factors for certain genetic diseases, but also it's mainly to see if that embryo is genetically competent, because oftentimes a genetically incompetent embryo won't implant or will result in an early miscarriage. So when you're going through all of this, you just want to kind of, you know, control for as many factors as possible. And then we also did the NIPT, which is the, what does that stand for? I don't know. It's basically it's early genetic screening test. It's a blood test. It's non-invasive. It's not like amnio. They test for a wide range of genetic disorders, like Down syndrome, but a wide range of other ones, including some microdeletions. So we did a full panel, and they all came out perfectly normal and fine. So at this point, the only thing I'm waiting for is the 20-week anatomy scan. And we're hoping that all looks good. 10 fingers, 10 toes, no other, malformations or deformations. I'm not sure what the right word is for that, but we're hoping everything looks good and happy and healthy. Okay, what are you doing with the rest of your embryos? Great question, and this is a controversial one, so please, if you're pro-life, don't me. But this was not obviously an easy decision for us. IVF in general is not an easy decision for many, many reasons, but including this one. This is not easy. But basically, when you harvest your eggs, you mix them with the sperm, and then they get, they turn into embryos, and they grow, and then you freeze them. And you really don't know how many of those eggs are going to, or embryos are going to survive and make it to what we call blastocyst. And then you don't know, if you're going to PGS test them, how many of those embryos are actually going to be genetically competent. So you could end up with you could have 20 harvested and then end up with 1. We actually were lucky enough to have 12 beautiful embryos frozen, or blastocysts frozen. And I have 7 left. If I decide to have a third baby, I don't know yet. If I decide to do that, then potentially I'll blast through a few more of those, just trying. We don't know. We could go through them all. But if not, or if I still have some leftovers, we have decided to donate them to science, because I'm a science-minded person. This is what I'm passionate about, especially reproductive science. So this was important for me. Your other options are to destroy them, to donate them to another family, or you can do something that we call a mercy transfer, which basically, I know some religious families decide to go this route, but basically what you do is you don't take any of the drugs that you normally would take for an IVF transfer. And so you would implant them, the doctor would implant them in the surgery room during a time in your cycle where you don't really have any chance of getting pregnant. Everyone has, you know, morals and values and different ideas of what's going to work for them and their family. And I know people are going to say, well, why didn't you donate them to another family in need? And, you know, I would love to help more families in need who are struggling to have their own family. But I don't know, call me a bad person, but it's just the thought of having my child, my genetic child, that is my husband and me together, and it's my biological son's brother or sister out there in the world and probably in my city without me knowing, is just like really unsettling to me and like really strange. And so I'm not sure I'd be able to get past that, even though I know it would be such a beautiful thing to do. So I have done other things to help the infertility community, including donating to one of my favorite charities, Small Wonders. It's a Toronto-based IVF charity that helps families who are struggling to conceive and struggling to afford artificial reproductive technology. So I'll leave a link to them below. I basically, anytime I have a party or birthday or, you know, baby shower or anything like that, I've always had my friends and family donate to that rather than to give me any gifts, because I just think I don't need more stuff. And if it could help somebody else, what a beautiful thing. Okay, let's move on. Okay, but on that note, please keep the comments clean and respectful and kind. We all, you know, make different choices in our life. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Next question. Did you ever consider adoption? Another tough one. So, of course, I mean, I think adoption is a beautiful, beautiful option, but I don't think that it's necessarily easier than IVF. I think a lot of people, like in the comments of my pregnancy announcement, kind of said that, like, oh, why would you put yourself through all this trouble and spend all this money when adoption is easier? I don't think it's actually easier. I know a lot of people who've gone the adoption route. It can take months, if not years. It can take a lot of heartbreak, a lot of frustration in the system. It's not simple. But of course, if I was unable to conceive my own biological children, either via my own body or through surrogacy, then absolutely I would go down that path. I think it's a wonderful gift. And I really, really, really do have so much respect for parents and couples and individuals who pursue that route. It's so beautiful. Okay, next question. How did you deal with social situations and determining whether or not you tell people even before the second trimester? Really, really good question. So personally, I was always really open. I'm an open book in general. I mean, I have a YouTube channel and a blog, and I am a online personality. So it just comes with the personality and the territory. But I know I didn't come out to you guys until 12 and a half weeks, but that was really to respect my husband's wishes because he's a very private person. But basically, anytime that I saw any of my friends, I just told them straight up. And most of my friends knew about the miscarriages throughout the year. Most of them knew that I was going through the IVF process again, even if they maybe didn't ask very specific questions. I was just always very open about it. And if I were to have told someone and then maybe miscarried like a week later, I wouldn't have thought, oh shit, I shouldn't have told somebody so early, how stupid of me. I would have thought, okay, you know, this is a really good opportunity for us to talk more about miscarriage, which is so common and yet nobody talks about it. And also an opportunity for me to get the support that I need from the people that I care about in my life. I know that this is like a really personal decision, and a lot of people just feel so anxious about telling anyone and don't want to tell anyone until they're, you know, well into the second trimester, and I get it. This is just based on my personality and what works for me and what my needs are. And the fact that I just feel happier and more supported when I'm able to talk to people about my problems rather than just like shut them down and move on. I'm a sharer. I mean, what can I say? Okay, next question. Okay, so how did you deal with the thought of potentially not being able to carry your own baby, aka have to go through surrogacy? Also, really great question. And I mean, it was really a hard pill to swallow at first. I am arguably, as you probably have figured out, a very perfectionist type A personality. I like to control situations. And I have a feeling like a lot of you guys who watch me probably are the same kind of personality type. So the thought of having somebody, you know, several hours away via flight, God knows where, carrying and taking care of the most important thing in the world to me, without me being able to be there and micromanage and oversee the entire process and situation and take care of things the same way that maybe I would take care of myself and my health and my body. Oh, that really freaked me out. So I was having a hard time coming to terms with it, and it really felt like a huge loss to me. So of course I was devastated at just the thought of going down that route, even though I was preparing myself for it. But I guess this sounds weird, but I really just tried to focus on the kind of trivial positives in that scenario. Mainly that, like, one of the kind of things that I came up with was that, like, well, if I don't give birth to the baby, I probably won't be able to breastfeed, which another major loss for me, but it will mean maybe the surrogate will pump for me and pump breast milk for my baby. And I know that sounds like a horrible positive, but I wasn't able to breastfeed my son. And I have a huge amount of guilt and shame and sadness around that. I chose to exclusively pump for over a year. And for any of you moms out there who have pumped breast milk, especially exclusively, you know how hard this is. It's completely all consuming. It really took over my life. And I completely lost touch. I felt like I lost touch with who I am and my social life and just my ability to be myself in my own body. So it was a real struggle for me. That whole experience of breastfeeding and pumping was really traumatizing for me. And I remember the day that I stopped pumping for my son, which was just after 1 year, and I was already dreading starting up again with baby number 2. So that for me in my head was like, I guess this tiny little minute positive or benefit, that, and like, I guess like I wouldn't have to recover from labor after, you know, or from pregnancy afterwards. Like, these are such trivial benefits in comparison to what I felt like I was losing out on, obviously. But it just felt like all I could really hold on to help convince myself that maybe this process wouldn't be so terribly hard for me. Now, if any of you out there have gone the surrogacy route or are surrogates yourselves, first of all, kudos to you. I mean, I have such respect for women who, you know, how selfless are you to put your body out there to help another family? That is such a beautiful gift you can give another family. So thank you for your service. But yes, if you've been through this process, I would love to hear your experience on this. I know people who have gone this route and really thought it was amazing. So I'm sure it's just a personality thing and the fact that I'm like a control freak. But yeah, I'd love to hear your input and thoughts as well. Okay, so next question. How do you continue on after multiple losses and miscarriages and not be terrified for your next pregnancy? So that's a really good question. I don't think you'll ever not be terrified. Parenting and motherhood is terrifying. And even when the kid is out, the worrying doesn't stop, right? It's just the beginning. There's gonna be a whole lifetime of issues to worry about as your child grows up. This is just step one. And yes, it's a very scary step, of course. It's the beginning. You want the beginning to go well. But yeah, I think you just have to take it day by day and celebrate like those little victories, like getting, you know, another day, getting to that next ultrasound, getting another week ahead, you know, getting that anatomy scan or the prenatal screening. So just taking it one step at a time. As for how did I continue, honestly, there wasn't really anything specific that I did other than just having faith that the right baby was going to come at the right time for my family, and that everything really happens for a reason. I know with, my son and before he was conceived, we had a chemical pregnancy and I was totally crushed. But in retrospect, I look back and I feel grateful because I really do feel like I got the legit best child for me and my family. I think he's, I think everyone thinks this is their child, but I do feel like that, thank God, this is the baby that I got. And I can't really imagine it any other way. So of course, with this round of cycles, it was more challenging because we had back-to-back disappointments that we had to endure. But I think just kind of reminding myself of how amazing my first rainbow was, and that good things are really just kind of like worth waiting for. Now, I am also like not very religious, though I feel a lot of people use and lean on religion and their religion to help them get through some of these hard times. But what I'm gonna say is gonna sound really super silly to probably most people, but there's this movie that I used to watch when I was a little kid. I haven't seen it in like 25 years. I think it's called like The Bluebird with Shirley Temple. Like, it's literally from 1940. Shirley Temple, folks. She was just a tiny tot, so sweet. But I loved Shirley Temple when I was a kid. Not just the cool drink, the non-alcoholic drink that we used to get from like Swiss Chalet, but also all of her movies. So in this movie, there is this like scene where they call it the land of the unborn children or something. And it's kind of like heaven. And there's all these kids in this like, ethereal place waiting to be born. And they have their siblings and they're all holding hands, like waiting who's gonna get called today. And in like one scene, like one of the kids gets called and gets like ripped away basically from their sibling. And it's like heartbreaking to watch. Like I literally haven't watched this in 25 years and I feel like very emotional just thinking about that scene. But sometimes I think about that and I think, maybe there's a child somewhere just waiting to be reunited with my son and with me and my husband and us as a family. And even if I wasn't meant to have another biological child for whatever reason, but I still felt like our family was incomplete, I am sure there would be a child out there, an adopted child, who also would be, waiting to be reunited with my son and my husband and I. So yeah, that was like a long, weird, super weird answer to a relatively simple question. But I guess like even without religion being a huge part of my life, I just reminded myself that embryo that didn't work out for us, it was just not the right one for my son. It wasn't good enough for my son. And, he deserved a special sibling, whoever that was, and it was worth the trial and error to get it perfect for him. So I don't know, that was maybe my thinking. Maybe that works for you as well as you go through this process. Okay, well, I think that's all I got for you guys right now, but stay tuned. In like a week or two, I will put out the part 2 of this vlog where I will talk specifically about pregnancy, about this baby and this pregnancy and other kind of juicy little tidbits. And of course, if you have any more questions, whether it is related to my pregnancy or IVF, infertility, anything like that, anything I talked about, if you want me to go into more detail, leave me a comment below. Do not forget to subscribe, push the little bell button so that you do not miss out on notifications. Give this the thumbs up, share with your friends, and I will see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye.